So good afternoon and welcome to a Learn Live broadcast today with Chris Hunter. Good afternoon, Chris.
Afternoon. How are you doing?
No, great. Thanks so much for calling in. We are today going to talk about GDPR, which is an emotive subject. I know I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail, and your role in helping businesses understand that. So great for you to do that. And while we're live, we are able to take some of your questions. So if you do have any questions for Chris, feel free to use our chat facility. If you're watching this back later, you'll need to know the chat facility is always open. So Chris will, I'm sure, be able to help you with any questions you may have around this topic of GDPR. So Chris, I suppose the obvious thing to ask you first is, what is GDPR? Because I've heard this name being bandied about for a long time now, but let's just break it down. What does it actually stand for, and what's the implications of it?
So the famous acronym stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. It came in 25th of May last year, and it basically replaced the old 1998 Data Protection Act. A lot of businesses and organisations think it's all something completely brand new. It's not. It's basically the old rules and regulations on steroids. It's just bringing it into the 21st century, because if you think about it, 1998, not many people were using social media. People started using emails, but everyone lives online these days, don't they? So it's basically just to bring it into the 21st century.
And your company, HM Network, just briefly tell us, what do you do? Because I know you're based in Lancashire.
Yeah, based in Preston. HM Network, two divisions essentially, but basically Martin and I both used to work at BT Business Direct. We were both data specialists, so we would sell lease lines, wide area networks, fibre broadband and telephony to schools, colleges, SMEs, micros, right across the country, really. We had an opportunity in 2013 to leave BT, but basically to become external partners ourselves, which we did. And it gave us an opportunity to deal with the same sort of customers we had done previously, but also to expand our portfolio and to offer in other things that were complementary. Firewalls, for example, training, making people aware about this, that, and the other. When we were at BTR, obviously, as you would expect in a big business, lots of red tape. Whenever you wanted to introduce a new product or service, it had to go through legal and go through all the relevant checks. When obviously you run your own business, you're a little bit more flexible. Still a lot of red tape to deal with, obviously, but because you're your own bosses, you can take things on that feel right and do your own due diligence, and it's a lot easier, to bring things to market, really. HM Network, about 2.5 years ago, got involved. We'd heard about GDPR through one of the business partners we were working with. We started to ask a lot of our clients what they knew about GDPR, and nobody really knew anything about it. We started running a series of events to try and raise awareness within Lancashire about GDPR and what it meant and why it was coming in. I think we ran something like 19 or 20 events with about 1,100 businesses coming. Held a number of events at University of Central Lancashire, Rossendale Council, Preston City Council, a number of schools, Burnley Themis, to packed rooms, because when people had started getting wind of it, they're all going, right, we need to go and do something about it. Where do we go, and where can we get some sort of tips and advice? So when we started looking into it for our own business, we didn't think it was going to affect us. There was a common misconception being bandied around that if a business has got less than 250 employees, they didn't have to comply with the GDPR.
And can I just come on to that point?
Yeah,
because there is the question about, is this for big corporations? And we hear about Facebook, for example, being in breach and all the data that's for the Cambridge situation, the incident there. Is it that concept? In the early days, can you remember people saying to you, "Oh, it's not about us"?
A lot of businesses were burying their head in the sands. And to a certain point, I think we did. We looked at it and thought, this is going to be a lot of hassle. We need to. At the time, there's only 2 people in our business, and we thought, in order for us to try and do everything needed to comply with the GDPR, we're going to have to do nothing else but devote our time to that. So we started looking into it. In fact, we did a timeline. So on the events, we basically showed businesses a timeline of what we did, from the moments of sleepless nights to the realization that, hang on, we really do need to deal with this. Because you're talking about before about, is it just for big corporations? No, it's for any business or organization that deals with any personal data. You've got a duty of care, an obligation legally to make sure that any data you've got control of is dealt with safely and securely, and only for the purposes that it was intended originally. You can't take somebody's data from a soft play centre, for example, and then start marketing to them for fitted kitchens or new driveways. And I think this is the reason why GDPR came in, because there was a lot of misuse of data over the years. People would accumulate data or scrape data from different places and say it was their pot. Say, for example, a nightclub in Preston. I've got a pot of data with 1,500 people that come week in, week out. This business might then go and start marketing to other businesses, but they can't do that. It's not their data to do so.
I suppose I'd like to ask you as well, because everyone thinks data, they always automatically think email addresses. It's not just about email addresses, though, is this?
No, that's
It's about people's privacy, people's name even.
Yeah. So
can you be in breach for just ringing up someone cold, for example, these days?
So the GDPR and calling is two different things. You've got the Privacy and Electronic Communication Regulation, so let's go back a bit.
Yeah.
The Data Protection Act 1998, where rules and regulations about what you can and can't do with people's personal data. In 2003, a regulation called PECA, or the Privacy and Electronic Communication Regulation, came out, and that was basically the rules and regulations around email marketing, telephone calling, any communications digitally or electronic. That's been replaced shortly. So the GDPR replaced the Data Protection Act, and PECA has been replaced with the e-Privacy Directive, which again is going to be more change, but again in line with the 21st century. So
that side of it, I think people are just nervous because they don't know what they can't do. So let's clarify some of that today then with the GDPR. You go on about GDPR a lot, about it's actually improving processes within businesses as well. So can you give an example of where you've clearly seen someone's processes improve just because they've started to care about the way they email people, for example?
You hit the nail on the head slightly early talking about Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. I think in the early days, businesses thought this isn't going to affect us because we're not a big organisation, or my business is too small, I don't have to deal with this. Until that scenario came out, that scandal came out, and then it hit home with everybody, because pretty much everybody on the planet has got a Facebook account. And when it's your data that's being misused, you go, hang on, I don't like this. I want to be able to find out where that data has gone. I want to know who else has got access to it and what they've done with it. So when you think about it from that perspective, it hits home and you think, hang on, if I've got other people's data, they're going to want to know the same sort of things that happen with mine. So you need to be able to open up a channel of communication. So if somebody's received an email from you, whether it's marketing or not, you need to be able to give them the ability to respond and say, I don't want to receive emails from you anymore. Please opt me out of any future communications, or I don't want to receive phone calls from you or SMSs from you. You need to have something on your website that allows people to do that.
Right. And that's a big part of this, isn't it? We were talking before we came on air about, everyone makes the mistake of emailing people. Maybe they presume they want to hear about what they've got to say. But if there's no opt-out, you can be let's call it a breach, because there's no way that people can
non-compliant
can be forgotten in that process. So, and even if people have agreed to take information from you, it's not for an eternity. They should be able to, I believe, go onto your website and remove themselves
at any time. Yeah. So they've provided information to you in order to receive updates or marketing about a specific product or service, for example. If somebody has opted in to receiving marketing from you, you are able to carry on communicating with them things that are relevant. If it's something completely different, for example, you would need to obtain consent first. So technically, if you've got a group of businesses that run completely different products and services, you would have to have relevant consent for each of those different businesses. You can't just go, I'm the umbrella company, I can sell whatever I want to all these people. They've loaned their data to you. It doesn't belong to you.
Yeah, no, I get that. So you mentioned there about some businesses thought, it's too much like hard work. This is a lot of hassle to make ourselves compliant.
Yeah.
You mentioned the famous case of our accounts lady has been on a course. Are we now compliant? I mean, you must get that as well. People say, we've got an expert now. We've got a GDPR expert in our business. We must be compliant. That's not the end of the story, though, is it?
No, not at all. I think what a lot of businesses are guilty of is assuming that this can all be done in a 2 or 3 hour period. I've sent the accounts lady or the burst of the school to a 2-hour event. Everything's covered now, surely. Well, no, because the risk creeps in to your staff and the people that you work with. If you've got one person in a business they might fully understand the GDPR, but if they're not articulating and communicating what's required to everybody else, that's where all the other risk creeps in. It's been able to evidence that everybody in the business has been made aware of data privacy, that understands the consequences of data privacy, to know what they can and can't do, to make sure that they have read and understood their company handbook, to be able to evidence that they've understood the company handbook. Because what happens is, if somebody does have a breach, it's like, well, it says in your company handbook, you can't do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
People don't read it. They get a PDF and then they just keep it in the drawer till it's needed.
So you probably ran more training courses than you care to mention today. You've got lots of people in a room talking about this. What are sort of the top 3 questions, if you like, that people ask you about GDPR? Those common misconceptions about what it's about that you hear all the time.
Misconceptions, right. So first of all, it's only going to apply to businesses that are 250 or above. That's complete nonsense. Any business, whether you're a one-man band, whether you're 4 or 5 people working in an office, if you deal with people's personal data, you need to be able to prove and evidence that you comply with the GDPR. It's not something that you can do overnight, as I mentioned before. People think, I'll have somebody come in and give us a talk and that magically makes us compliant.
Chris will sort us out kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, if somebody does come into your business and helps you work through it, the book doesn't stop there. It's not a case of, well, anything happens, it's their fault. It's like, well, hang on, we're actually showing you what you should be doing. It's up to you to be able to evidence it and keep doing it moving forward, because it's not a tick box exercise. It's not something that you've gone, right, I've done 20 questions, we do all that, it's fine. It's something that needs to change moving forward. It's culture change. People have got bad practices embedded in their businesses, and a lot of the time it's due to time constraints. People know they should do things a certain way, but the stress with work pressures and having to hit deadlines, they'll find shortcuts in order to do something quicker, but it might not then be following the relevant.
Do you get people saying to you, I don't know if you remember the old Y2K kickoff, and people saying, oh, it was just all a scam to get people to change their systems or change their hardware. Do you get some people saying to you, oh, this is just one of those?
Scam? All the time. And it's definitely not a Y2K thing, because the whole thing with Y2K was people didn't know whether their computers could handle the clock rolling past 2000, could they?
Yeah.
Obviously.
Oh, yeah, planes were going to fall out of the sky, weren't they?
Nothing. I think the only situation that happened there was, I think one of the train timetable boards in, I think it was Paris Metro or something like that, didn't work. But no planes fell out of the sky. But a lot of that was due to the fact that people had gone and done a lot of legwork in the back end to ensure that wouldn't happen. Same thing with GDPR. It's not a case of, it's come and gone since the 25th of May, we've got away with it.
I don't know but when it was actually, I can't remember when they kicked in now. There was a date in time, wasn't there? Was it last March maybe, when we were approaching D-Day, if you like, for this? And literally that whole month, whatever month it was, there was people emailing me constantly saying, "Are you happy to stay on our mailing list?" But you need to literally register to say you want it. So literally, you had to go through that process. So is that what you mean about people getting ready for it? The people who were considering the options were doing it properly.
So I think you'll find a lot of the people who were emailing people to say, "Do we have your consent?" were actually doing it illegally, because if they didn't have their consent originally, that would have been in breach.
So that's a good point, isn't it? Because if they were working off data lists that they didn't have any permission to email you on in the first place, were they actually in breach?
So if somebody's engaged with you, if you've emailed somebody previously and then they've bought a product or service from you, it's part of an ongoing contract pretty much. So if they're happy to receive emails from you, you can assume that that's okay. If you start marketing people from scratch, or if you've been blanket emailing people and you've never had their consent in the first place, you're not allowed to do it. All it takes sometimes is one complaint to the Information Commissioner's office that they've been receiving emails from somebody without consent, and the ICO can knock on that business's door. Something you asked me outside before about any fines that have sort of come in. I think there was a campaign for the Leave EU. Something like 200,000 people were emailed without consent, and they got fined recently £40,000. So it's not all about the big fines, although the fines under GDPR are a lot bigger than they were under the Data Protection Act. Even a fine for one email going astray that cost somebody £1,250 is enough to...
So let's talk to people about the ICO briefly. You mentioned ICO. What does it stand for, sorry?
The Information Commissioner's Office.
And so they're kind of overseeing all of this in a sense, are they?
Pretty much.
So when you get a complaint, it goes to those people, and then, do you get fined straight away, or is it sort of steps that they go through first?
No, I actually met with the ICO in 2017. I went to an event called the IC17, and I thought it was going to be businesses like ours having a roundtable event with the ICO. walked through the door, and there's about 400 people in the room with some amazing production. And after about an hour, I thought, these don't look like businesses like us. There's a lot of international people here.
Yeah.
It turns out the ICIC stood for International Convention of Information Commissioners. So it was all the ICOs from around the world, essentially, all converging to talk about freedom of information and data privacy. And I thought, well, I paid to attend, so I sat it through, and it was really interesting. And over lunchtime, I'm sat, well, actually stood at like a podium having my vol au vents, £90 worth of fancy food. And this chap came wandering over, and he said, "Oh, I hope you don't mind me standing here. There's nowhere else to stand. Are you one of our guys?" I went, "It depends what you mean by one of your guys." He said, "Oh, well, I'm James Dipple Simpson from the ICO. I'm the deputy commissioner." Oh, right, okay. So a little bit shell shocked. He said, "Well, where are you from?" I mentioned about the GDPRexpress events that we've been running. He said he'd heard about them, and asked what the word on the street is. And at the time, I said, "Well, if I'm completely honest, they're all panicking. They're all papping themselves." And off the back of that, actually, about 3 or 4 weeks later, the guidance on the ICO's website previously had been aimed towards the larger end of the SMEs up to corporate. And they changed it. They did some micro business guidance as well, which was really handy, because a lot of the small businesses then saw this isn't just for the bigger businesses, this is for everybody. I also mentioned to him the fact that we've been approached quite a few times by people trying to sell us data that wasn't compliant, or that had been repurposed for something else. And there's a story a couple of weeks later that a company had been fined for misuse of data, something like £70,000. So, yeah.
Well, just on that point, actually, I mean, it's fascinating what you were saying there about the fact that they changed tax, and clearly they were concerned then, after speaking to yourself. But these fines, I mean, they seem really like huge fines, and people say they're ridiculous, fines in the sense for what you're actually breaching. I mean, does the penalty match the crime?
Yeah. So we were talking before about the ICO don't like to fine if they can't, if they don't have to. They will always give you correctional measures first. There's also another common misconception that the ICO are going to go looking for businesses that are in breach. They won't. They will wait until they get a breach notification, or somebody's complained about their data being misused. They might then go to a business and say, "Okay, there's been a couple of complaints. We need to look what you're doing with data. You need to be able to evidence what you're doing. Show us how you store data. Show us your record of processing activities." And if businesses have got no idea what they're talking about, they go, "Well, what's a record of processing activity?" Or, "What do you mean about we shouldn't be emailing people without consent?" The ICO then goes to say, "Well, it sounds like you're not following the old regulations, let alone the GDPR. Let's have a look at what you do. We'll give you some correctional measures. We'll give you a timescale to deal with it. We'll come back and we'll check again." Okay. If the businesses aren't complying, they will then throw a fine at them. So a really good case study was a company called Boomerang Video a couple of years ago. Video game rental, basically, but their website got hacked. So it wasn't their fault. They've not sent people's data out. The website was compromised. Somebody got in there and downloaded 23,000 customer records. Somebody on that list realized they were getting emails from somewhere else that they'd only registered that email address at that company with. ICO got wind of it. They investigated. They gave them correctional measures, which they didn't deal with. They went back and said, "Right, so what have we done about the correctional measures we gave you?" "Oh, we haven't done any. We've not had time. We've been too busy." They got fined £60,000. So this is under the old regulations. What a lot of businesses don't understand is under the old regs of the Data Protection Act and PECA, you could get fined up to £500,000. Under the new regulations, under the GDPR, or the Data Protection Act 2018, as it's now been brought into the UK's law under, it's up to 4% of your global turnover, or 20 million euros, which is about 17 million quid. And you're right, it's not a case of they will throw the book at you and fine a business that's turning over 20 grand a year, 20 million quid, because you can't justify it. It will always be in proportion to the severity of the incident. If a company can demonstrate that they're following the principles of the GDPR and they're trying to do the right thing, there might still be a fine, but it'll be a lot less than it would be to a business who's got no regard over those rules and regulations.
Well, thank you for that. Right. So with what's going on currently, we don't want to make this interview time sensitive, but there is a certain word that keeps banding around called Brexit. I'm sure you've come across. People think this is a European initiative. What's the reality? If we do move out to Europe, is this thing going to go away?
No, it's not going to go away. Bearing in mind that the GDPR, so it's Europe-wide, you're right. It doesn't just apply to countries within Europe. It's dealing with citizens in Europe. So America's obviously not in Europe, but if they're dealing with any clientele in the UK or in Europe, they have to be compliant with the GDPR. So the government passed the GDPR into Parliament it was on the 23rd of May last year. It got royal approval and then got turned into the Data Protection Act 2018. So although it wasn't called GDPR anymore, it became part of UK law under the Data Protection Act 2018. So not a case of we're leaving, we can just ignore it. It is here to stay. It's the way things are going to be moving forward.
And as a positive to all of this, we said right at the beginning about how it can actually improve processes within businesses. It's a good thing to do. Even just like culling your database of email addresses, so maybe you save money on MailChimp because they actually charge you by volume. So have you seen already, despite the fines and the privacy, have you already seen companies improving their processes because following this?
Oh, definitely, yeah, 100-fold. So we talked before about Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. When it hits home and it's your data people are talking about, they think, hang on, we've got a load of data here maybe we shouldn't have anyway. So it was a good opportunity to have a cull. Say, for example, you've got a customer database of 10,000 people and you've got 100 active customers on there. You've got a risk, if you ever had a breach or somebody hacked into your email or a list got into the public domain somehow, if you've got 10,000 names on there that's not password protected or encrypted, that's a breach and you have to tell the ICO. You also have to tell everybody on that list their details have been compromised. If you only have 100 records that you actively deal with, it's going to be less severe of a penalty if you do get investigated because you've only got 100 names that got out there.
Yeah. And just finally, a question that came in earlier about someone was worried that after hearing you talk, I think at one of the events, that their data may be not as secure as it needs to be. And I think that's an element that's come out of this, isn't it? Because a breach can be someone actually finding your a memory stick on the bus and being able to get access to an Excel spreadsheet. Is there something in this around making your data more secure anyway?
Definitely. It's like we said before, it's a case of changing bad cultures, isn't it? And thinking, would I like my data to be treated in the same way? If people leave, politicians have left laptops on trains before now or in taxis. There was a case, I think it was Manchester Met Police, need to check it, but they did a video interview with somebody. I think it was about a child sex case. They sent the video to a courtroom, but it never arrived to the courtroom by the post. They don't know where it went. Nobody said, I found this, and it's sensitive, but the police got fined £150,000. That's for one DVD going the wrong place. So you're right, people have taken heed and they've started dealing with data in better ways. They've started working differently at home, making sure that their computers have got anti-malware protection on or antivirus protection. I was telling the chap outside earlier on, there's a company in Birkenhead a few years ago who were victim of some malware. Basically, they clicked on an email. Somebody had been doing a phishing exercise and sent them an email to see if they would click on it, looking like it's from HMRC. Their accounts lady clicked on the email, it opened up, everything looked fine. As she was doing a banking, the computer closed down. She thought it was a bit strange. Anyway, she started doing the wages run a couple of weeks later, username and password into the computer. She got her active token out for whichever bank it was, typed in the 6 digits, typed them into the computer, but before she had a chance to press enter on the computer, her computer completely froze up. She couldn't do anything with it. Again, she restarted the computer, went back into the bank in 5 or 6 minutes later. She checked on the account balance and somebody had taken $100,000 and 30,000 euros out of their account. And again, that's because they had somebody having keylogin software on the computer, no anti-malware to see if things were spotting things in browsers, and they couldn't get their money back. Luckily, they survived it. But that will put a lot of businesses under.
Fascinating. I think cybersecurity is definitely another reason to get you back, Chris, because that's a whole new interview, isn't it? Because there's so much more people could do to protect their data, like you say, at home and in the office as well, for sure. It's been great. Thank you so much for the advice on this. I think also, from any business, just what could they do next after speaking to you today or listening to you today? What steps can they take? What small steps can they take if they've not even started to look at this?
Don't panic, first of all. Don't bury your head in the sand. talk to a specialist partner, even talk to us. We'll do people a free micro assessment, which will give them a very, very high level overview of things that they are and aren't doing, like a traffic light system. So we might ask them 15 questions. It's a case of, we don't do it yet, we're thinking about it, we do it, it's not applicable. Whatever you respond to gives you a red, amber, green, or grey. That will normally show businesses, hang on, we thought we were all over this and we're obviously not. The next stage from that is if somebody wants a private consultation, we can send somebody down, we can do something over a Zoom video, and basically ask people a lot more questions about how they operate their business, what they do, what the staff do with data, are people aware about X, Y, and Z, and build them a bit of an action plan together, really. Like I said before, it's not a case of it's something you can do over a 3-hour period and magically wave a magic wand and it's all right. It's a case of planning things out.
Accounts goes on the training course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a case of putting some plans together to say, okay, we can't do it overnight. We know we're not going to do that because we've got a business to run. Let's plan on doing something once a week. We'll catch up. We'll see what you've done. We'll then task them with doing something else the week after. And over time, they're chipping away at it then. Yeah. Raising awareness with staff. If you can't take people off the sales floor or whatever they do, in the warehouse or whatever, you can send them e-learning. So they'll watch a 5-minute video in the morning, do a quiz, do the rest of the working day, and over 3 or 4 weeks, they've learned 40 or 50 modules, and it starts to make sense.
Fantastic. So this has been a Learn Live business interview. It's been fascinating talking to Chris today from HM Network about getting yourself future-proof, I suppose, for GDPR and all the implications of that, and just being careful with your data as well. So it's been absolutely fascinating, Chris. Thank you so much for your time. Cheers. And hopefully we can have Chris back again as well, talk about how to protect your data and cybersecurity. In the meantime, this has been Learn Live. Hopefully we can see you again soon for another business broadcast.